Hi, good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us for this session. It's packed with content, and my name is Martina Steffes-Gridneff. I'm the Brussels correspondent for the New York Times. I'm going to be guiding you through what's bound to be a very intensive and really insightful hour or so of discussion on the European Union's migration and refugee policy, talking especially about the new pact that the European Commission has proposed, as well as relations with Turkey. As you probably see in your program, in your schedule, we've split this session into two sessions that are a bit different, but equally important and interesting. It's my great pleasure to start the session with a hopefully quick fire interview with the European Commission Vice President for Promoting the European Way of Life, my compatriot Margaritis Skinas, and then we'll be moving on to a panel discussion later. But I don't want to spend too much time sort of making introductions, and these things can become a little tiresome, take up too much time. I want to jump right into it with the Vice President and try and keep our conversation fluid and hope that we get to as much substance as possible. So, Vice President, reform in the migration policy space in the EU has long been elusive, historically has been a sort of difficult policy area, and the European Commission is starting yet again its Herculean efforts to bring about reform after the 2015-16 extraordinary events that affected the EU. That being said, we're hearing again of delays and potential snags in negotiations with member states. Realistically, what is the timeline that you expect for the pact to reach its next stage of evolution?
Good afternoon, everybody. Kalispera, Martina. Before we start, you have to promise me that you will not have the baby in the next half an hour, okay?
I'll try.
Okay. Coming to your question, yes, migration is something that has always been sensitive in EU politics. It touches upon the hardcore of sovereignty, in a way defines our politics, is becoming a cleavage in itself. So seen from that perspective, it's not surprising that the European Union, that had so many successes recently, still struggling to produce a European consensus on migration. We tried, as you remember well, in 2015-16. It didn't work. We can discuss why. I think mainly because our proposals were very close to the 2016 events and the sort of the collapse of Syria and the massive numbers of migration that we had at the time. Now we are having a second go under more normal circumstances, if I may say so. We have a proposal on the table since last September. It's a proposal on which there is a certain convergence of the different sensitivities, but as you rightly point out, we do not have yet the outlook of a possible agreement. But I'm, as always, on the optimistic side. I think that we have crafted a landing zone that allows everybody to meet each other. And in that way, I mean, we have seen an equal spread of pain and complaints around European geography. But this time, I don't sense deep red lines as last time. Having said that, of course, there is still work to be done. Unfortunately, both the German presidency last year and the Portuguese presidency currently have fallen victims of the pandemic. You know, in these sort of aisles, you need people to look each other in the eye. You need lunches and dinners in small restaurants in Brussels. You need physical contact, and this did not happen. So there is an element of Zoomlessness in all this. But let's hope now that as we come close to the German and the French presidential election next year, there is a renewed dynamic for an agreement. I hope that these elections would be rather helpful rather than obstacles in getting to an agreement.
Interesting. And as things stand, what parts of the pact, as it's being proposed, do you see as being the weakest in terms of consensus? And frankly, what are you kind of prepared to give up or move on to reach that consensus?
Yeah, for those who have taken a closer look at our proposals, and I know that Olivia has, I like to present our proposals as a three-story building, a house with 3 floors. On the first floor is a reinforced external dimension of migration with new partnerships with countries of origin and transit. We will never be able to manage migration internally unless we manage externally, and I know that you will be discussing Turkey in the second session. The second floor is borders management. We need a more meaningful, a more common, a more European procedure at our external borders, both in terms of patrolling the border, but also in terms of borders procedures. Something has to happen at our external borders once someone shows up there. And the third element is the solidarity element and burden sharing. The first 2 floors pertain more to the responsibility dimension of the pact. The third floor is more on the solidarity. So the difficulty in all this is to strike the right balance between the responsibility and the solidarity elements. In terms of your specific question, I get the feeling that there is universal agreement on the first floor. Everybody agrees that we need strong external dimension migration policy, and recent events in Canary Islands, in Ceuta, simply validate this point. On the second floor, it's a mixed bag. Because yes, people agree on border management, people agree on border procedures, but our frontline member states want this to happen differently than the receiving member states, if you like. So the timing of these procedures matters a lot, and we're not yet there. And the third floor is equally sensitive, because there we have to strike a balance between giving the assurance to the countries of first entry that each time that they push the solidarity button, they will be able to get what they need, and at the same time convince the others that they will have the possibility to provide the right mix of solidarity that makes a difference, but without being them obliged, if you like, for the union to impose them the kind of solidarity that's necessary. So there will be no exit door from the solidarity floor, but there will be a functional, effective solidarity that we need to define.
Let me just start with the first floor, the one that you're most confident about in terms of consensus. And of course, it sort of sounds like an obvious and good idea. And the European Union obviously has actually started building on these types of partnerships, both with transit and sending countries. There's concern, however, that the EU isn't bringing that much to the table for these countries, in particular in terms of legal pathways, be that labor migration and so on. And the practice on the ground shows that there is a labor market for people who arrive in the European Union for work. And are not documented. I want to leave the asylum component to one side for a bit. What can the EU bring to those partnerships that's new and goes a little beyond the sort of promises of visas and so on, and can actually reflect a deeper partnership of equals, which is also a phrase we're hearing a lot about this part of the agreement?
Yeah, Martina, you know Africa well. You worked there, you've been there. I think the starting point when we're discussing the first floor is that what we're trying to establish is not something that works for Europe. This will not work. We have to work something that is a comprehensive win-win partnership. We must make sure that we are able to offer comprehensive, I like to call them country offers or global partnerships with these countries that would bring together everything that Europe can mobilize to mainly achieve two objectives. First, to create better conditions for people to make a decent living in their countries, rather than putting themselves in the hands of the smugglers in the Mediterranean or in the Aegean. And this is not only a question of money. 5 years ago, we tried with the trust funds, and it was mainly money and investment. We have to go beyond the money element. Of course, we will be needing money, but we also need trade preferences. We will need visas. We will need legal pathways. We will need talent partnerships. We will need Erasmus scholarships. These comprehensive offers would make a difference, we believe, on the ground. That's one objective. And the second objective is help our partners on the countries of origin and transit to reinforce their own border management systems, to create better conditions, not only for returns, but also for the conditions to help the returnees, because, someone going back is the easy part. Making sure that he has something meaningful to do upon his return readmission is another thing. So this is the new approach. I repeat, much stronger and fuller than the 2016 simple trust fund approach. And this is what we're now assembling and putting together. And we're doing this, I must say, without betraying any internal commission secrets. We're doing this with the very active cooperation of all my colleagues involved. Josep Borrell from the diplomatic side, Ilva from the Johansson from the home side, Valdis Dombrovskis on trade, Maria Gabriel on Erasmus. So we are trying to get this right this time.
And just to get to the second floor quickly, obviously this has been a very sensitive issue, and we've seen you defend the work of Frontex, even as the agency has come under severe criticism about its role at external borders. Talk to us a little about how the pact can potentially stop pushbacks and improve conditions and align them with European values at external borders, because we are obviously, myself as well, reporting on practices that are un-European and conditions in reception facilities that are un-European in terms of the values that you're an ambassador of. So how does the pact improve that?
Yes, I want to be very honest in answering this question. Frontex has been the great winner of the budgetary negotiations for the next 7 years. They are getting 6 billion euros for the next 7 years, which is more than the double of what they got previously. And they will be having a standing corps of 10,000 border and coast guards with uniforms, with the EU logo on them, with their own equipment. So this is happening for a reason. This is happening because, contrary to the 2015-16 proposals, now we want them to be a central part of our policy mix. So border management will happen. But having said that, I do not see this as being antithetic to our values. I mean, protecting the border and making sure that we can defend our values, for me at least, is fully compatible and possible. We are the European Union. We are not Australia. And we intend to remain European Union. And we're very sensitive on all these allegations, and we will investigate and ask our member states to investigate and ask Frontex to make this work properly. And if there are any management issues that pertain to Frontex that need to be addressed by Frontex management and the management board of the agency, they will have to do that. But I will not accept that the second floor will be empty. Because some people would like to see Europe having a migration policy only with the first and the third floor. And that cannot happen. We need border management in Europe. And we need to do it in our own way, the European way, if you like. And of course, it's a process. There will be teething problems. we are taking a road now together. This is something that we have to make work. The US Coast Guard, it took 100, 200 years to get where they are. But I would like to avoid, how should I call this, European self-flagellation, if you like. That even before we start having this reinforced role in border management, I would like to avoid a view or a prospect that this will never happen in Europe. It will happen, but it has to happen the European way.
Right. And do you think Mr. Leggeri is the right person to continue leading that European way at Europe's external borders?
Yes, I think that Fabrice Leggeri is someone who is capable of assuring this transition. He's very well aware of that. I think that's his job. I think it's better to have someone in charge of this job who has been there in the previous Frontex era. I'm not sure that a new face that would jump into the new reinforced mandate would have more leverage than someone who has seen the baby and then becoming a toddler and now a teenager. So, and he's very well aware of his obligation to address all these issues. As you know, he's very often grilled in the European Parliament, grilled also in the press, and he's answerable and accountable not to the Commission, but to the management board of the Frontex. And yes, I think he will be able to lead this transition.
Before I ask the last question, because it's just such a tight session and so full, I just want to make sure that our audience is able to add any questions for the Vice President in the chat function. Please go ahead, please add any questions you may have, and I hope we get a chance to engage with the Vice President through your questions as well. I know that it's an expert audience, so I really look forward to receiving those. Just open the chat box that's in the bottom of your screen and just punch it in there, and I should be able to see it immediately and put the questions to the Vice President. Just a question maybe kind of bridging us to the next session, which relates to the partnerships issue as well. In 2015 and 16, under very specific circumstances, we saw the EU-Turkey statement, and in some respects, this has been described as a partial, at least, success. There is the argument, however, to be made that the statement empowered Turkey's political leadership to use asylum seekers as bargaining chips. We saw that really spill over in a very dramatic, very traumatic and difficult way in March 2020 with events at the northern Greek-Turkish borders. And we've also seen parts of that statement just become completely defunct. Is it really such a great template? Do we really want to renew it and empower the Turkish leadership so much to actually use people against its immediate neighbors, use people to get gains out of the European Union, which can be divisive and fractious for the European Union? And do we want to give this kind of leverage to other potential partners at Europe's external borders that actually have even less of a stable government than Turkey, for example, let's say Libya in the central Mediterranean route? Was this really such a good deal to bring it forward to 2022 and beyond, without judging it in the context of when it was struck, which was a very specific moment?
Yes, many interesting and complex questions there. I'll try to deploy as many simple answers as I can. First, the Turkey is a big room of the first floor, and rightly so. Not only because it's a key country of transit, but it's also because Turkey is the country that hosts the biggest number of refugees in the world. And this is something that we need to give credit for to our Turkish friends. It's not an accident that Commissioner Johansson and I visited Ankara on the second day of our mandate, on 4th of December 2019, and we met President Erdogan precisely to show the importance of Turkey in all this. Second question, what we managed to achieve with the 2016 statement was a success. I do not want to say that it was a model for how the first floor would look like in the future, but it was a success. It helped us manage. It involved the Turkish state, the host communities, the UN agencies, the NGOs who were able to provide accommodation, schooling, healthcare, even pocket money to the 3 million refugees living there. The EU taxpayer, I think, was money well spent from the taxpayer to do that. Now I'm coming to the most complicated parts of this relationship. Did this work as planned? No, it didn't. There were parts of the statement that, as you know well, were not fulfilled from both sides. We have to have the courage also to say that from our side, some of the things that we said there, Europe did not deliver. We did not revisit the Turkish accession calendar. We did not do the things that we promised. On the other hand, they failed to change their anti-terrorist law that would be the key for us to moving on visas, which was also part of the statement. But the money was well spent. The conditions for the refugees were decent, and the cooperation of the Turkish state in managing flows was satisfactory. So now we're getting to a point where we need to decide if we'll have a /2, a new chapter in this relationship. And I think the answer is yes. We want to have a second chapter, a new chapter. The answer is that this time would have also to draw some lessons from the first relationship, probably structure this agreement as on a more realistic basis or more pragmatic basis, not on a maximalistic basis. Probably we should involve some of the state structures of Turkey, not only the host communities and agencies and NGOs. And finally, I think we should also draw the lessons of the events in Evros last year, where indeed there was instrumentalization of refugees, and something that I think that our Turkish friends came to regret, because if this helped someone, it only helped to galvanize EU unity on the need to have a meaningful first floor. So this is my guess that this can work under these conditions. We're working along these lines, and let's see from now until June, probably a bit later, if we are able to produce this new chapter.
Thank you so much. I'm going to try and transition into taking questions from a broader set of people. I want to remind our audience they can put questions in the chat function. Please do. Or I'll have to keep asking the vice president questions, and that can have mixed outcomes. But the first step toward opening up this discussion is inviting Olivia Sundberg Diaz, policy analyst at the European Policy Center, who's also a co-author of the report and research you'll be hearing much more about in the second part of this session, for some responses and thoughts and reflections on what the vice president's been telling us, and maybe for a question of her own. Olivia.
Thank you very much, Martina, and thank you very much, Vice President, for the very insightful remarks on the efforts that are being made to advance negotiations on the SEAS, on the Common European Asylum System, and also for the renewed momentum on relations with third countries. As you've pointed out, the New Pact proposals are highly complex and also closely interlinked, including a cross-border management, solidarity, and external cooperation, or the 3 floors of the house, as you put it. And in the MEDAM report that we published today that Martina just referenced, we argue that this also raises the stakes. In other words, if one of these elements hits a bottleneck, this could potentially undermine the logic of the system as a whole. For example, if third countries do not significantly scale up return and readmission, if border procedures don't work as efficiently as intended in countries like Greece or Italy, or if European states refuse to comply with solidarity commitments in practice. So first of all, I'd welcome your thoughts on this. Is there such a risk in your view? And secondly, how can we ensure the successful implementation of the Pact's proposals in practice, and not only on paper? Is there enough trust and willingness to cooperate between member states and to agree on the proposals, and in practice, actually invest into strong asylum and migration systems on the ground?
Yes, Olivia, thank you for these remarks/questions. I think you are absolutely right when you say in our pact proposals, everything connects to everything else. And I could say this differently. One of the problems that we are having with the existing situation, with the existing system, is precisely the fact that this is a non-system. Rather than a system, it's a patchwork of different regulatory solutions that produce unequal outcomes, black holes, bottlenecks, the moriaces, of everything that we do not like is the result of the existing non-system. So we took particular care when designing these proposals to make sure that this pact is I use the metaphor of a building, but I could also use the metaphor of a circuit where all the wires connect so that there is a permanent flow of regulatory solutions from one stage to the next, from countries of origin and transit, border management, border procedures, screening at the border procedures, then returns for those who are not eligible for asylum, solidarity for those who stay with us. So I appreciate the fact that you rightly point out that this is a circuit, it's a connected whole. The second thing, I admit it's difficult, which is once you design a proposal, then you have to go through the stage we are now currently in, which is the agreement. And then there's the third stage of application. I venture a certain frustration also developed after so many years working within the EU meanders of policy making, that the application of the rules will depend on how the negotiation or on the outcome that the negotiation will produce. If you were asking me, are you confident that the pact will be well applied as designed? I would say categorically yes, because that was the purpose. But I cannot venture a prediction unless I see what member states and the European Parliament, by the way, make of our proposals, because very often, EU negotiations produce little monsters that make sense on the night of the agreement. It's always night or early morning, but then when you call to apply and implement. So I hope that the bulk of our philosophy, most of the things we put there will survive so that the application will be smooth.
Thank you so much for that. I'm gonna switch to our chat because I've already received a few questions. I'll ask the first one because I'd love an answer. And thank you to Andrew Connolly, who has posed that question. The Council of Europe, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, and I will add to Andrew's question, independent news media, claim the Greek authorities are illegally returning asylum seekers by setting them adrift at sea. Do you believe this is happening? Yes or no?
Frankly, I'm not qualified to answer this question. First of all, because I do not speak for the Greek government. Secondly, because I do not have an operational role. Thirdly, because the situation in the Aegean is a situation which is unique in so many respects. Fourthly, because after the Evros events, there has been so much tension between Greece and Turkey. And to be able to offer such a categoric response when I lack many of these elements, it's not something I don't want to do. I told you before, we will continue fighting smugglers, and we will continue facing hybrid threats, and we will continue to do everything possible against instrumentalization. But at the same time, everyone who has the willingness and the right to apply for asylum in Europe will have to have the possibility to do it, because Europe will always remain an asylum destination. So what I do know is what I know through Frontex, because we are part of the Frontex Management Board. There were processes where Frontex was involved, and these processes cleared Frontex in so many respects. And for the rest, I know there is also a scrutiny group in the European Parliament currently scrutinizing these arguments, and I very much hope that we will have a reply from them as well. But I will not offer an opinion just like that at the top of my mind.
Fair enough. And I have a question from Céline Bauloz, I hope I pronounced this correctly, from the International Organization of Migration. And she asks a very valid question, probably the last one we'll be able to take. What kind of legal pathways in the European Union are there foreseen in the years to come, in particular discussions for low-skilled migrant workers that are clearly in demand and needed in certain European Union member states?
Yes, we already have very interesting pilot projects with countries of Northern Africa financed by the European Union budget that are small in scale, but they are the precursors of what one day would like to see as a generalized system of legal pathways into the EU. Because let's face it, let's have the courage to face it. This does not make me very popular in certain political families, including my own, but the demographics of Europe and our huge skills gap inevitably will push us to this relationship of legal migration and legal pathways. So yes, we will be working now in the months and years to come to transform these rather modest yet important pilot projects into a more sustained, a more ambitious system for legal migration that would have not only the so-called low-skill workers that we need for healthcare, probably agriculture as well, but also higher skilled workers for which we already have a major European agreement with a blue card, which we agreed 10, 15 days ago. So there is lots of water boiling in the area of legal migration, and we have the political ambition with the Commissioner to carry this work forward.
Vice President, thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate your time and all the thoughtful responses you've shared with us today. Hope you go into a lovely sunny weekend here in Brussels where the sun is finally out. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you both, and I want to rub salt in your wounds, Martina, because I'm not in Brussels, I'm in our motherland, so the sun is assured for the rest of the week.
I am deeply envious. Thank you.
Thanks
everyone for staying with us throughout this very interesting discussion with the Vice President.